and I am, like Guru already introduced, an assistant professor since 4 years in the Department of Metallurgical Engineering and Material Science at IIT Bombay. And I run this sort of group of about 10, 11 people, all inclusive of undergrad, grad, PhD students, and a postdoc who has recently joined. So it's called the Micromechanics of Materials Group. And my primary interest has been determination of micromechanics and mechanisms of materials, which means we try to determine what loads materials break at or deform at, and try to predict their lifetimes, and also look at mechanisms of how they fail, so that one can, prevent those failures subsequently, or at least predict them better and better. Let me try to use the pointer. Yeah, so I will now come to the data analysis part, and why observing and reading data correctly is important. So certain examples that I'll go through, so that it motivates you to do this course and to correctly report and interpret the data that you see. So of course there are some statements that have been made in public by public people, like saying I'm the least racist person in this room, without really counting or having a measure of what index this person used. So, and then something like all of Bollywood takes drugs. So this all is obviously a misnomer, unless literally every single one of them is taking drugs, which is not proved. So completely unproven statements, of course, are a problem. Then there is problem with data misreporting, in the sense of how we read data. For example, it makes for a good headline to say, because there are reported cases of violence, that Uttar Pradesh had the most cases of violence against women in 2019, let's say. But one has to consider, when say most cases, one has to consider what population against which we are talking about, right? So if you look at that, then Assam reported the highest rate of crimes against women at 117.8 per lakh population. So this gives a more relative and a true measure of the rate, rather than just saying the absolute number of cases. So there have been instances of people misreporting data either on purpose or by mistake. So these are things that we need to read the fine print for. Then there are, of course, data ignorance for various reasons. A very common phobia is flight phobia. People fear flying in aircrafts because it appears that the failure is going to be extremely catastrophic, and that is probably one of the reasons why there is that fear. But if you look at the estimated prevalence of fatality, then the number of accidents are very, very small, right? So there are about 0.6 fatal accidents that are known to occur per 1 million flights globally. So, but this phobia itself is very common. It's about 2.5 to even 6.5% of the population. Now, I have not read the fine print about which exact population they're talking about, but it's probably the US population. And also, if you look at the percentage, go back and look at it. What is the percentage of people dying in automobile accidents? But we don't really have a phobia of driving in a car or in a vehicle on the road as much as we have for flights. So that is sometimes emanating due to data ignorance. Then sometimes you have problems in defining data, or how we quantify something. And if that definition itself changes, then it's like changing the goalpost. So if you look at the data on diabetes, then this was again a report which said the global prevalence of diabetes among adults over 18 years of age rose from 4.7% in 1980 to 8.5% in 2014. Which is, of course, attributed mostly to lifestyle changes and why it's becoming more and more common. But there is one more thing that people have to take note of, is that there has been a change in the classification and diagnosis of diabetes itself. And that has happened in 1997. So has that classification also led to some changes in the way that things get reported? These are the things that one has to also account for. Similarly, we had a GDP rebasing that occurred in 2015 by the Central Statistics Office in India. And that included a change in the base year as well as the use of market prices instead of the factor cost, which they usually, earlier used to do. So that led to changes in old and new estimated growth rates, and there was some controversy around it as well. The political impact notwithstanding, one has to read data very carefully, is what this amounts to. Of course, data fraud in advertising is a very common thing. I mean, you would have seen shampoo ads, ads about food, about from pharmaceutical companies, which claim all kinds of things. For example, here, there is a BioSlim complex, sort of a cream or lotion that comes from Nivea. But if you look at what they claim, of course, it is ridiculous. So it says regular use significantly reduces body size. But how would they quantify something like this? And on which person have they quantified? So these are misleading ads, and they have to, pay a hefty fine for advertising like this. In some countries, it is, regulations are very strict, and people do pay up for what are called as fake or fraudulent advertising. There is another one here from Kellogg's Cornflakes. Somehow I've been seeing more advertisements related to weight loss and slimming. So the Kellogg's Special K advertisement also made some false health claims. And it said one can lose weight as it adds only 114 calories to a person's diet. Now, is this some kind of an absolute number? What are they referring to? What quantity are they referring to? Nothing is clear. So again, there is misleading claim. And then you can see certain things in the picture which says vitamins, iron, and zinc and folic acid. So essential nutrients are, powering you. So you feel good about buying something like this. But many times the amount that is contained of these nutrients that is contained in the food is less than 1% of the recommended dietary allowance. So it's not really helping you in buying Kellogg Special. You might be rather eating your idli dosas or parathas instead. Then there is this, which is also very common these days. We are looking for better and better germ killers, better immunity boosters, and so on. So this was an advertisement by Dettol, which claimed 10 times more protection against germs. But funnily enough, they did not compare this to germicidal actives of other products which contained any germicidal actives. So they were comparing it to products which did not have any germicidal actives claimed. So this is again a claim that is falsified and sometimes deliberately, placed in advertisements so that so as to increase sales. So one has to be sure again to read the fine print. Then there are some very funny poll results or election results that you would see. I'm talking about polls and not just in terms of election polls, but also about polls in general, right? So there was a poll by Times Now, which said, do you think Indian government has taken suitable steps to give China a befitting reply? Now, can anyone say what is wrong with this particular ad, or what is the mistake in this particular data? You can unmute yourself and speak.
No, madam.
Actually, ma'am, they have not disclosed how many, what was the size of means candidates they have interviewed.
That is good. Okay, so that is something they have not revealed. What is the sample population, right? So that is one. But just look at the pie chart that is shown here and look at the numbers and just what is the most obvious mistake that you're seeing here?
60% tends to be bigger, so they have done in a reverse manner.
Right. So this is again in a very misleading way, placed like as though, you know, the 39.8% is bigger than the 60.2%. So visually it looks like most people said yes, but most people said no to this particular poll, right? So there are these data reporting errors. Again, one more question for you guys. I hope you're able to see clearly. This is on the 2012 presidential run in the US. Okay. So they're talking, I think, about vice presidential candidates. And they're saying so many, 70% back Sarah Palin, 60% back Romney, and 63% back some other person called Huckabee. So what's wrong with this one?
It's more than 100%. It is showing more
Yes,
than
it, yes.
Right.
It,
So again, right. So it should add up to 100%. So again, a very obvious mistake, but the media keeps running these, charts and pie charts and histograms, and you must be very careful about what they are saying. This is another one. It talks about gun deaths in Florida. Sorry that some of my examples are from the US, but if you recall or if you know, the gun license is very easily available in the US. So Florida had some change in their laws. Okay, in 2005, it enacted something called Stand Your Ground law. So do you think the gun deaths went down or went up after this law was, introduced? This is again a question for you.
it is in a reverse direction it is going.
Yeah.
Yes.
So these are puzzling, right? Like, why would somebody
Yes.
place a graph? Usually you tend to see the y-axis going from 0 up, but they have placed it such that it's going, increasing from the top to the bottom. So in fact, with increasing after that particular law was introduced, the gun deaths increased, but it appears as though there is a drop if you look in the reverse direction. Okay, so another issue is about representing data well such that it is easy to read. So just better readability, which is also something you will learn in this course, of which type of plot to make to represent which type of data. So this is about market share, let's say, of 5 different companies. And if you're a marketing professional and you want to, advertise your business, then if you show such a chart comparing US to UK market share, it's very hard or it's very difficult to read this. Like, you cannot really see in which place it is higher, which place it's lower, which company is doing how. So a better representation would be something like this, right? Where you have the percentages marked and you have this in a graded color coded histogram like image. So that would give you a better visualization than this pie chart. Okay? So please do recall, sorry, not recall, please note that the data that I have taken, I have referenced the people below. So these are not something that I have plotted or calculated from. The next set is this contour maps or maps in general, okay? The color-coded maps, let's say. So maps generally represent the landmass and not the people, right? But if you want to show data, which is mostly in terms of the political and economic data that you want to represent, then you should show it in terms of the population base and not as the land area. So that is what is shown here. Instead of the routine map the land map that you see, here a cartogram is shown where you have the population scaled up, area. So you can see very clearly that China and India are having the highest population, and therefore all the if you think of GDP or how much carbon footprint we are leaving, all of these have to be standardized or represented in terms of their population base. So that is what this is showing. Similarly, if you look at, again, the US elections, you must have seen these red states and blue states, right? The red states correspond to the Republicans and the blue states correspond to the Democrats. So maps, again, are not really representative there. So if you look at this 2012 elections, and if you look at the original land-based or area-based map, you tend to think that it's probably the Reds who won, right? But it's actually, this is 2012, so this is Obama who won these elections. So it's not really the land, but again, the population which matters. And if you scale it with respect to the population, you see that there is a large fraction of the blue states showing up, because the population density is maximum in the east and the west coast in the US, and not really somewhere in the middle where there are just mountains and grasslands and mostly agricultural land. So these are some of the ways in which maps can be represented so that it is more easily visualized. So what are the problems with data reporting and interpretation? So we saw various things. So for example, one can change the measurement units and standards. An example is that you change from pounds to kgs to ounces. So from metric scale to the SI scale, then it looks like the number has changed, but you should then look at what the units of the number is. Then you can have incomplete comparisons, saying one product is better than another, but not explaining in which way it is better. Then there is inconsistent comparison. That means you can compare a product to only those competitors which that you will beat. Like you can claim that you're number one in something, but you're number one because you're only looking at all those people who are below you. So the other one could be misleading illustrations, like placing the picture which is much bigger than actually it is. So that was about that bar graph, or the pie chart that we talked about earlier. Then there is this angel dusting, which means you add a very small amount of something that is beneficial, and you label that you have this thing without telling how much percentage you actually have and whether it is effective. So cheating or direct falsehood is one thing that people do, which then you have to be very, very careful against, because it's harder to find. But many times you can find, because it's just misrepresentation or misinterpretation of data. And if there is no accountability, then we are in the middle of a digital epidemic, let's say. So what are some of the most bizarre or surprising claims that you have come across? Can each one of you unmute yourself and tell me? Have you seen something which is unbelievable, but they will claim that the data says this or that?
Fair and Lovely's claim that it can turn anybody into fair with the fair.
Right.
And because of its success, there was again a launch of Fair and Handsome.
Right. So why is it that nobody sues them, right? Like why can't someone sue them and say that you are wrong, this did not do what it should have? Of course, they'll come up with more explanations of what else you should have used with it so that you actually got fairer or something. But yeah, you're right. Anything else?
Madam, they changed their product's name from Fair and Lovely to Glow and Lovely. That's why.
Right. Yeah.
Because it is a little bit racist.
Yeah, that is more about, I think going with the wind of the political winds, or being politically correct and so on. Yeah. Anything else? Okay, so we will move on. And the other thing is that the common man's language is very different from the actual language of statistics and data, right? So we use words like, oh, this is very effective, or we say, this is significant, as though like it's important. And we say things like something is rare or something is very common, or we use the word normal, like normally this is what is supposed to happen, and so on. Or we use majority also. We don't know whether you're meaning simple or absolute. And we also use risky and safe also in very qualitative terms. And what do they mean as teachers in engineering colleges, or as professionals? We should be more careful about using these words, because we should know that they carry meaning, and that is what you will learn also in the process of this course. So I will show certain more examples of the data being okay, but their interpretation and prediction being wrong, in fact, in academic studies. So this is work by authors Wang et al. In a journal called Obesity. Now, obesity is an epidemic, right? That is projected to be an epidemic. So there is a apocalypse that they predicted, which said that all of America is going to be obese by some year, 2048. And as you can see, the projection is from what is observed. And the data that they have taken is from a reliable source. But what they ended up doing is like a linear regression, and then they did some projections. So not everything is a linear fit, right? But they did that, and that goes to 100%. But what is again funny in this? Can anyone, look at this and say what is funny? You can use the left figure if you like. See, this left figure is for overweight and obesity combined, which has body mass index of greater than or equal to 25, and this one is just only obesity, which is BMI of greater than or equal to 30. So ignore this. Just with this graph, can you say what is wrong with this?
Is it so that men are having an increasing trend and women are showing a decreasing trend in obesity? Is it so?
Not really, right? So the women are the ones which have these dotted.
Yes.
So in fact, their obesity is projected to grow faster and reach 100%.
More steep rise. Okay.
Sorry?
They are showing a steep rise.
Yeah, they're showing a steeper rise. Although initial set of data, their overweight or obesity was lower to start with, but their rise was steeper. That is fine. But what exactly do you think is wrong? Look at the legends here. One says all. All means men and women included. Yes. And then separately for men and women. I'll give you a further hint. Look at the men and look at the all.
As they are proceeding further, they are crossing. Matlab, I may not be good in.
No, that's okay. There's no good or bad. We want to just hear you out and interpret as.
Yes, as the man is showing a little bit lower side rise, and but when it is about all, so it is not following the trend. Maybe
no.
Ma'am, it is showing that in 2040 and in 2050, little bit, let us say 2045, all are getting obesity, but men are not obese beyond that also.
Right. So how is that possible, right? If all are obese by, let's say, 2045, then what happened to the rest of the, how come men were not obese and then they reached 100% later? So that is why you should not be fitting every type of data just because, see, actually they had what they had was just 3 or 4 data points. Okay. So they ended up fitting this sort of a straight line and making predictions for the next few years, which is something that again lot of journals, lot of academics, everybody seems to do this because a linear fit is the easiest to do. So again, the same problem when they separated out the black men versus everybody else in the US, then they saw that the black men reach 100% and in 2095. So what happens to them in between is unclear because all of Americans have reached overweight or obese in 2048 itself. So these are the issues. So actually what would have happened is that higher the proportion of overweight people, as the number of overweight people grows, there are fewer skinny people who are left to convert. So the proportion will increase more slowly, right? So it should have gone off in this way. The graph should have taken a turn like this rather than going linear and straight. So this was the problem. And this is written in a very nice book called How Not to Be Wrong by Jordan Ellenberg. So this particular instance was taken up by him, and he cites various other examples of how statistics is sort of, misinterpreted, or there is some problem with the reporting itself. So,
Excuse ma'am.
yeah.
One thing you might have seen in polling during the polling seasons that the exit poll comes.
Yeah.
They predict by means of some data they gathered, but that does not fit to our expectations.
Right. Yeah, that's a very common thing. That's why I did not bring it up, because you've all seen that the exit polls are hardly ever, accurate. Because many times it's because of the sample population being not representative. So that could be one of the reasons. And we are going to talk about it. Of course, using scientific data, we will talk about it in the course of why we lead to incorrect or inaccurate conclusions and predictions. So this was just another problem that I'll use and then wrap up. So in common language, significant means something important, but statistical significance means something else, right? I think the more technical definition will be given by Professor Gururajan, but it just means probability is finite and measurable in that case. But the effect may still be very small. So maybe if it was not so commonly used, then we could reword it as statistically noticeable or detectable instead of saying statistically significant, because this word carries a different meaning to the common person. And just because we can detect something does not always mean that they matter. For example, application of risk ratios, saying that this has increased by 2 times or 4 times or 7 times to very small probabilities can be misleading, because they're already very small. So if you increase that by a factor of 2 or 4, it will still continue to be small. So it should not lead to some kind of alarm, because you are hiding that the overall probability is small, and the headline will just say that, this probability has increased by 4 times. So this was one of the study again reported by CUNY in US, where the sociologists found that infants, that is babies, cared for by in-home nannies had a fatality rate 7 times that of kids in the daycare center. This seems very scary, right? Then you would stop having nannies at home and send all the babies to the daycare. But if you look at the annual rate of fatal accidents, then in home-based care, it is 1.6 per 100,000 babies, which is a lot higher than 0.23 per 100,000 babies. And nobody wants to lose their baby. That is of course there. But you can see that both numbers are more or less zero. So the probability or the chance of this happening is so low that this sort of a study becomes meaningless. Not the study, the report itself becomes meaningless. And of course, these studies are assuming that all other things are equal. But if you look at this, you need to take the baby to the daycare center, right? So there are inequalities there. That probability also matters. For example, if you talk of taking the baby by your car or by your automobile to the daycare center, then car accidents killed 79 infants in the US in 2010. So in a year, you can see that there are quite a number of deaths, of course, of the people and the infants. So if the baby is spending about 20% more time on the road reaching the daycare, then the probability of fatality then may change, and it may not be, then this conclusion may be wrong. Okay, so this is another such example. And the academic examples of data misreporting and fraud and so on has also happened. So if you look at the number of retractions that have occurred in academia, then you can see that there are these top 3 most cited retracted papers. And funnily enough, these 3 papers are retracted, but they continue to be cited even after their retraction, which means people believe or have an old copy of that paper and they think that is true, and they are basing their own conclusions based on that particular study. And this is dangerous, right? So, for example, one of them talked about a link between autism and childhood vaccines. Sometimes correlations are made, but they have no meaning. There's no causation. So there is these errors also, and that paper was withdrawn. And a Nobel Prize winning scientist, Frances Arnold, has retracted her paper in the last year as well. And that was because the results were not reproducible and the authors found the data missing from a lab notebook. So again, somebody as famous as a Nobel Prize winning scientist has been very forthcoming about retracting the paper, but many of them do go undetected because the number of papers that are getting published are also so high. So one should not look at absolute numbers here. And if you look at the retractions in academia by country, then the retraction rate per 10,000 papers published, the Iran tops the list, and we are also somewhere not far behind, and so on. But if you look at the absolute numbers, then US and China lead in the total number of retractions, but they also publish a lot. So you can look at the reasons for retractions. One is direct fraud and misconduct, which we'll ignore. But there is a considerable percentage which has occurred due to reliability or reproducibility problems, or in general some error in calculations and so on. So these need to be rechecked, right? So what is reproducibility and what is repeatability? Anyone has any idea? What's the difference? Is there a difference?
Reproducibility means, madam, those data can be reutilized for any other research paper or some kind of
No,
reproduction work.
I am talking about an experiment or the data itself. When you make the measurement, how do you make a reproducible measurement versus how do you repeat the measurement? Like, what is the difference between these two? So let's say I'm measuring the composition of a certain material by a spectroscopic technique. There is something called spectroscopy, which you can use to measure the composition. If I am measuring again and again of the same strip of material, then it is a repetitive experiment. That is a repetition. But let's say I take different samples from a given batch and measure the composition and then see the variation. That is about reproducing that experiment, okay, and seeing how much variation is there. So reproducibility becomes more important in academic this one parlance, and reliability of the data is also something that goes along with that. So let's learn to do data collection, analysis, and interpretation. So this is again an example of a retraction, but something so people who have been very honest about. So Dries Pack is a psychologist at the University of Regensburg in Germany, and she ran into a friend in a research conference earlier in one of the years that this reference gives. And she wasn't expecting any bad news, but the friend says that, some of the group's data that she had shared earlier, which went on to get published in a paper in a journal called Acta Psychologica, had a coding error in the script used to assess the results. So this is one of the reasons why we are learning R. An error that is significant enough to scuttle the entire analysis. So she went back, checked, and her friend was right. So she knew that the work was fatally flawed, and they contacted the journal and retracted their paper. But this is the way to deal with it, right? Like, you accept and learn from your mistakes and then you move on. So this is some sort of a personal policing that you're doing, that when you found out that you were wrong, you retracted the paper. So things for us to remember is that data is never exact, in the sense that there is always some uncertainty involved, some error involved. So only mathematics is an exact science. So therefore we use statistics. When we do measure data, the sensitivity and the accuracy of the instrument that is used in measurement becomes important. So you would have heard of least count, for example. What is the least count of of the scale, right? So you cannot have an accuracy better than the least count. Then I just talked about repeatability and reproducibility of data. Then we talked about this sample population being insufficient or not representative of that population, so therefore leading to erroneous conclusions. Then one can also think about the distribution of data. If you are measuring the height of a group of people, then that distribution is usually normal. And when we mean normal, the mean and median are nearly the same. But there are distributions which are very skewed, which we will look at, which are not normal distributions. So one has to identify what kind of distribution the data has before analyzing it. Then classifying and minimizing the sources of error, and the sources of error can be accidental errors, which are actually easy to find. Then there are systematic errors, which are not easy to find. Systematic errors, by which we mean that there has been a calibration issue, that you made a wrong calibration, so all your measurements are off by a certain extent. In that case, you'll have to send your material to test at another place, which is called as a round robin test, and check whether those results are actually correct, because it's harder to notice. And then there are some unknown errors, and the random errors are the noise that is always there in any data that we collect, because I said data is not exact. The other thing that we need to think or keep in mind is the variables that are affecting the measurement. And when we have a derived quantity coming from that, we have to see if all the variables are accounted for, and their dependency, if they are independent or dependent, is that also accounted for. And then later, once you have some analysis done, you'll have to worry about the significance of the data, which means, the 95% confidence or the p-value and its implications. And later make intelligent, informed approximations and honest, credible reporting of your data. So that is the intention behind this particular course. And I think I took more than the assigned time. So I would like to thank you all again and welcome to this course. And hope you get to learn R, and hope I also learn some in the process, because I am as ignorant as you are in terms of using R, but we have of course used other tools to plot. So thank you.